and welcome to the very first episode of the Generation Logistics podcast. We're kicking off this series by talking about passion for the profession. My name is Hope Ellen and I'll be hosting this series, and joining me for this episode I have got three wonderful guests. If we can first go round, introduce yourselves by name and the role you're currently doing. Starting with you.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm an Operations Director for Wincanton.
Hi, I'm Neil. I'm a Portfolio Non-Executive Director and I sit on the board of Canaxia Logistics.
Hi, I'm Sukhdev and I'm a Graduate Trainee Operations Manager.
Brilliant. So we've got a mixture of different people here with different experiences, and I'm sure you've all had your different routes into your current roles. So starting with you, Sukhdev, how did you get the job that you've currently got?
So I went to university and I did business and supply chain management. There I joined the Nova scheme. So it was a group full of logistics companies in which I had the opportunity to work in. In my first year at university, I went to Wincanton Derby Subcon as a transport planner. So quite early on, I had the opportunity to work within industry and not just study it. So it was an opportunity for me to put my theory into practice into a role. I then did a industrial placement at Arla Foods, and that was for a year. So they kept me on in my fourth year working part-time. And then after university, I decided to apply to Wincanton in a graduate role because it allowed me to explore the company from start to end, essentially in 4 different roles for a duration of 6 months.
It sounds as though you kind of focused in on one area quite early on.
Yeah.
So your undergraduate degree could have been more broad. Why did you do that?
So I decided to go for more of a niche when doing my degree because I knew I wanted to focus on something. But prior to that, at A-levels, I studied business, psychology and biology, and business was one subject I enjoyed the most. Going through all the fundamental areas, operations was one that stood out, and we wouldn't really talk about much in operations. It was just your generic stuff. So I was keen to kind of take a deeper dive into that to understand what it was all about and how we essentially help and provide services around the world.
So I'm assuming that now you've got a passion for logistics, obviously the sector that you're working in, but to begin with, you had a passion for business. Where did that passion come from?
That's a very good question. I think it's just a subject I've always enjoyed. It was one of them that came quite easy to me in that sense, and I always went above and beyond when it came to assignments, doing extra research, just because I enjoyed that. I don't really know where the passion came from in that sense at the beginning, but it's more so it was what I was good at, and I think if anything, sticking to what you're good at is the best way to excel. I could have took a risk at the beginning and got into biology, but if I knew it was something I wasn't going to enjoy, then going to do a degree for 4 years, I wouldn't be setting myself up for the best expectations. So sticking with business and then defining what area of business I wanted to go to was the best alternative for me.
They go hand in hand sometimes, don't they? Sometimes you have a passion for something because you're good at it, or sometimes you're good at something because you have a passion. So it sounds as though that's what happened.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was one of them where business was something I enjoyed and supply chain wasn't really talked about much in the subject. So going to study it further allowed me to not only grow my passion, but grow my understanding of logistics as a sector and understand where I can fit within the supply chain to help support and provide resilience from start to end.
We'll talk more about the supply chain a little bit later, but moving over to you, Neil, tell me your story.
Well, my story starts in the dim and distant past. So I've been in the logistics sector for nearly 40 years now. But I was brought up in a seaside town and worked in retail through my teenage years. And I joined a retail program with the expectation of seeing a broad church of the different functions within a retailer, from banking services to agriculture through to buying and marketing and including logistics. I joined the distribution and logistics division as my first placement and never escaped. I found that I really enjoyed it. I think they thought that I fit, and I guess in some ways it's one of those happy marriages that's continued for decades now.
I'm sure over 40 years it's changed, the sector. But back then, what did you enjoy about logistics?
I think it all really comes down to a passion for serving customers. And nothing that we do in this industry escapes the fact that there is a customer, consumer at the end of the chain. And it's always about finding better ways, more efficient ways, more productive ways to drive service upwards and optimize cost. And it's that continual challenge that I think really brings the interest and the, I suppose, the hooks that draw you into it and never let you go, to be honest.
In your current role, what gives you a sense of purpose and passion?
I think at the moment, for me, it's about the variety. And that's one of the things that I think you see throughout your entire career. You know, the logistics profession or the distribution logistics profession isn't the same on a day-by-day basis. And what I've found over time is that variety and the ability to demonstrate a form of personal flexibility means that it's a continual learning journey. And you know, as I've decided to step out of full-time executive work and pick up a portfolio, it's that variety, it's that day-to-day change that I find really still presents that sense of interest and commitment that I've had throughout my career. And I suppose the other thing is that getting towards the, let's call it the twilight stages of your career, you actually want to give something back. You know, so when I graduated, you know, there were only 2 logistics programs being offered by UK universities. So yeah, the industry's changed enormously now. You know, it's very much a profession, whereas you know, it maybe wasn't seen as that 40 years ago. And so I think a lot of the interest is the fact that it's a continual learning experience. You know, I'm involved with 3 universities now in terms of, you know, part of their educational programs within supply chain and logistics as well, as a way of furthering the profession. So, you know, whether it's my professional life, whether it's my personal life or the academic life, you know, a lot of it really is about the variety and the flexibility that you see within, I suppose, the day-to-day challenge.
I do get a sense from you that it's not only professional growth, but personal growth. It's shaped you, hasn't it?
Yeah, you never stop learning, you know, and I think that's one of the things that I'd always say to people coming into the industry. If you've got a sense of curiosity and inquisitiveness, this is a great place for you, because, you know, it is a very, very broad church. You know, it's not a simple thing to say, as an individual, you will fit into this part of the industry, or you'll fit into that part of the industry, because it is such a broad church. And I think that sense of really wanting to explore and really sense the different opportunities that really exist, whether they're close to home or further away from home, I think adds a dimension that you wouldn't get in other professions or in other careers.
Laura, I saw you nodding quite a lot when Neil was talking about purpose there. Tell me about your story.
Mine's completely different. So I didn't enter logistics through any type of program. I joined as a warehouse colleague. And I joined as a warehouse colleague on a startup. And when we were going through the startup, I started to train people. And from there, I was a voice super user. And I found myself in this exciting place where I was engaging with people day in, day out. I was helping people. I was supporting people when they were struggling with their voice profile. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. And as I went through the training with other colleagues, I then started to develop myself. And what I done is I watched people around me. I watched my team managers. I watched the shift manager. I had engagement with the general manager. And then you sit back and you think, I think I'm home. I'm good at this. And it was all around people. So I found my fit was around the people. It was around that support mechanism. Whilst Neil's been talking there, he's talking about the agility, ability. There's hard work there. There's dedication there, but we still need to be having fun. And I think the key factor for me throughout my career is all been around the people. There's nothing more that makes me or drives my passion is more the people going on a journey, that succession coming through, and you just see the team grow. And I think as soon as you start seeing the team grow, they enjoy what they're doing, they can see a path for their career, and everything then falls into place. It's really engaging, it's really enlightening. It's just, yeah, that's what where I place myself. It's all around our people.
Laura, it's really interesting and refreshing actually to hear you talk about human relationships, fun, the people being kind of your driver, because as someone who's not within logistics, I think of it as being transportation, getting a material from A to B. Is that what you thought when you started in this sector? Were you pleasantly surprised?
If I'm honest, I didn't know what to expect. I applied for a role that was close to home. I was successful. It was a startup. I'd never been involved in a startup before. So I joined, and it was only after probably the first couple of months where there was a bit of fun. It was the engagement side. And I think more it was about how you were made to feel. And you were made to feel a sense of belonging. And the more I felt that personally, and again, all the way through my career, that's what I've tried to do for any of my teams, is make sure that they feel exactly how I felt going through my journey. And that is that somebody will take interest, somebody is listening, somebody is almost there as a mentor for you to see you through your career.
All of these things that you're saying sound fantastic. But how do you actually ensure that someone feels that way? What can you do?
It's about talking. It's about listening. Sometimes people need a listening ear to get things off their chest. You can offer a support network for them. But I think more and more, the more you talk to people, the more you understand people, the more you understand where their passion is, then you'll understand where their drive is. That's when you can understand exactly what you can get out of people. And anyone can do anything that they want to do, but they need to, there's hard work there and there's dedication there. But if you add joy into that and have some fun along the way, I think it's a great place to be. And I think in terms of logistics, is exactly what you've just said there, the transportation and moving material A to B. It's not all about that. There's different sectors, there's different customers, every operation's different. It's a really interesting place to be. And I think for me personally, I've made a great career for myself, and it's a career that I'm extremely proud of. And if I can make my team feel the way I've felt through my journey, then I've done a real good job.
So for you then, Laura, the passion didn't come first. The passion came after you started within the sector, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Do you think that's the case for most people?
I think it depends on where they join. So the graduate scheme, for example, the graduate scheme will do a number of different operations, so they get to see all different sectors. So they see a variation. For me, starting as a warehouse colleague, I started in retail. I then moved on to grocery. I then moved on to e-fulfillment. I then moved on to multi-client. I then moved on to reverse logistics. I then moved on to low-end fashion. I then moved on to high-end fashion. I then went into convenience. From convenience, I then went into transport. From transport, I've then ended up with a number of sites that's automated. So everything I've learned along the way has been completely different. But as Neil said earlier on, it's every day you learn something new. And I think if you've got that passion there, you always want to learn. I was always told something about getting outside your comfort zone. And when you get outside your comfort zone, that's when the magic happens. And there's so many times along my journey that I've had to get out of my comfort zone. And it's a scary place to be. However, when you're prepared to do that, move out of your comfort zone, let the magic happen. And for me, that's exactly what's happened.
Neil?
I think you make a really interesting point that with all of the breadth and the variety in the industry, and with all of the development of technology and the innovation that I'm sure we're talking about in a different podcast, the one thing that you can't remove is the people. This is a people industry, and the one thing that you can't automate is the human touch, and that's always going to be here. And so if you can empathise with people, if you can learn to understand how they feel about certain situations, you'll go a long way in this industry, because it is fundamentally still about people. And that human touch element will always be a key part of it, because there are people-to-people interactions throughout the supply chain.
How have you seen that evolve with technology increasing?
I think it's really interesting, because a lot of people talk about the march of technology and automation of the industry really removing roles from the industry. It doesn't do that. All of the experience suggests as you automate, you actually increase employment for the simple reason that what you're doing, you're actually taking out, to some degree, the boring, repetitive elements that allow people to bring their creativity to bear on the the organisation or the process that you're actually involved in. So, for me, it will always be a key element, and it'll always be one of the more interesting parts of the industry. The simple, everyday interactions that make this a fascinating place to work. If you're going to spend 40 years, 5 days a week, working in this industry, you may as well enjoy it, and you may as well get on with the people around you.
Laura, anything to add to that?
You're right. It's around the people touch. I think people will never remember what you said to them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think touching on the automation and where we are now, that's a new career for people. That's where we start looking at engineers and taking them on a different journey. So again, we've opened up another level of a journey that people can take, which I think there's more and more careers within logistics. It's a great place to be.
We have got episodes in the series coming up on that topic in more detail, so do keep an eye out for those episodes. With that in mind, and with these new jobs and jobs that actually don't exist just yet, how can people prepare for the industry moving forward? Laura?
When you look at the technology and what we're doing, you'll always have, it will go through a project, and through project we have apprenticeships, for example. We've got engineering apprenticeships. We've got different types of automation, innovation, robotics. And again, I think everyone is on this learning curve now of where that can take us. So again, I think we're at the start of the journey. I think it's an interesting journey. And again, it widens that career path for a lot of people.
Shifting back to passion and fulfillment, Sukhdev, if you looked at a day in your life, and your job was probably very varied, but if you looked at a rough day, what do you enjoy the most?
I think for me it's a collaboration. So like I've mentioned, I'm on a graduate scheme at the moment and I'm working within the project management and transformation team. So it's more centrally based, where previously I was in a warehouse in a transport setting. So now being centrally based and collaborating with seniors with the same common goal, I think that's what I enjoy the most about my job. And it's ultimately brainstorming and coming up with these new and innovative ideas to make sure we are progressing on the project and we are transforming in the direction we want to, but having our client's vision in mind the whole time, which is key.
Do you also get to socialise with your colleagues on a kind of social, chilled out setting?
Definitely. I think, like we've witnessed, logistics is all about trucks and sheds. Everyone says that, but we are still human as well. We have our personal development we want to achieve. We want relationships we want to build. So I always make it a priority to, even if it's a 15-minute catch-up, put a 15-minute catch-up on Teams just to understand how your week's going. Because it's nice to build that relationship up, because then you feel like you can go to someone in a work setting if you are struggling with a certain project or deliverable at that point in time. So there's definitely a social element within work, and you can always fit it in.
I've also gathered from the start of this podcast, there's plenty of room for growth, development. Laura's bounced around all over the shop in different departments. So is that collaborative kind of and social element a good thing because you can be exposed to different roles?
Definitely. I think ultimately in one role, if you network correctly and you build those relationships up, you never know when your avenues can next cross. And especially working in Wincanton, which is such a big company, I could be having a call with one individual during the week, do a site visit next week, and they'll be there as well. So it is always good to build those relationships and connections, because it doesn't know where it's going to take you.
Neil, talk to me about work-life balance. How is that within this sector?
I think you can look at it in a number of different ways. The work can be hard, it can be demanding, it can be a real drain on time. But as in many other walks of life, there's balance to be found, and I think employers in the 21st century are far more balanced in the way in which they seek to allow their teams to find a balance. When I started out 30, 40 years ago, it probably wasn't like that. It was a little bit more command and control, and you'd find that you were sent somewhere to some far-flung corner of the world tomorrow. I think there's less of that these days, although it still happens. But, I think, as Sukhdev says, quite correctly, you build relationships within the workplace that you can take outside of the workplace. And one thing that I've certainly learned over the years is that while supply chain covers the globe, it's a very small industry, and you invariably come across people, repeatedly over the decades, and you build relationships for life within this sector, for good or for bad. And the industry gives you lots of opportunity. I've been fortunate enough to be involved in activities all over the world, and I've seen places that a lot of people will never get the opportunity to see, and that can be close to home as well as far away from home. So it can provide some challenges. Certainly when you're young and trying to build your career, you can be dragged from pillar to post. When you're starting to settle down and build a family, it can be inconvenient from times. But I think employers are very open-minded and very supportive. And it really is about the way in which you want to manage your career as much as the way in which you want your career to be managed for you. So, there's a bit of give and take in there.
You mentioned going to different places there around the world throughout your career. Where have you been?
I think it'd be fair to say that I've seen pretty much every corner of the UK to begin with. But then, I've been fortunate enough to work, in China, in Hong Kong, in India, South Africa, over in the United States, because this is supply chain is a global industry, and to really understand the way in which you optimize supply chains, you've actually got to go and kick the wheels from time to time. And so you get great opportunities like that. Whilst the amount of time I've lived abroad has been very limited, I've actually managed to travel and to see lots of different cultures, lots of different business operations around the world. And, it's all part of the learning experience. It's part and parcel of building that understanding, that awareness, and that passion for the industry.
You also mentioned that there's been a shift in terms of employers in the 21st century kind of being more accommodating, more flexible. Is that because well-being is more of a priority?
I think it's partly down to that. I think it's also down to the fact that logistics and supply chain is now a recognised part of the business community, and I think it's also in part down to the fact that it's actually a comparatively difficult environment to recruit into. It costs a lot of money to recruit people into this industry. If you were recruiting a middle manager into a middle management job, it would typically cost you between £30,000 and £40,000. You don't want to lose those people. And so the investment that you're making in recruitment really needs to be paid back to those individuals through managing retention. And therefore, people are taking a different approach. It's not the view today that probably would have existed 30 or 40 years ago, that people will stay with a company for a decade, 2 decades. The expectation now is that an individual will probably stay with your organisation for between 3 and 5 years maximum. And therefore, you need to extract the best out of them, and they need to get the best out of the organisation. So there's almost a contract of sorts in there. And therefore, there's a different kind of relationship, I think, with employees and the organisation as we move deeper into the 21st century. And I think that's a good thing, because people are really keen to understand the lifestyle choices that their employees are making and the challenges that they're facing, both inside the organisation and outside of it. And so there's a greater empathy, I think.
It's kind of like the employer has to prove themselves, would you say?
Daily.
Laura, talk to me about work-life balance from your point of view. Does it differ depending on the role that you do within logistics?
I think it does. And I'll be honest, that's something previously that I was not very good at. When I look at what I've done in the past, there's been a number of startups that I've been involved in, which again is hard work and dedication. And I find it hard to go home, especially if it's busy. It's because I want to be with the team at the end of the day. Now that's completely changed for me now, and I think we have seen a big shift with well-being and mental health, and I think it's now one of the two of the subjects that we talk more commonly about, and that's right, it is okay not to be okay and to open people up. I do think previously my answer would be, did I get it right? No, I didn't. Have I got it right now? I'm a lot better than what I was. And I think with the work-life balance, I think because every day is very varied, it's busy, it's exciting, the adrenaline's going. I think as soon as you get home, I'm not talking for the other two, but I like to rest. And that's where I take me time. And I like the quiet, I like to enjoy myself. And it's almost like that reset then, where I'm then ready the next day to start again. So I think work-life balance is really, really important for your mental health, for your well-being, and again, just to re-energize you for the next day.
Yeah, because if your cup is empty, you can't do a good job, can you?
You always need to bring your best self. And I think if you can be the best version of yourself, the way to do that is to look after yourself. And if you get, your work-life balance right and you're taking the right rest, you're literally filling yourself back up. But you need to look after yourself.
Sukhdev, anything else to add to what Neil and Laura have just said there about work-life balance?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it definitely is the role you're in at the moment. It is hard to get that work-life balance, especially in my situation. I'm in a graduate. I've got a lot to prove at this point. I'm in different roles, and it's showing that I can excel and meet expectation and standards. There's so many seniors within the industry, and there's so many you work with that do go above and beyond. So it's showing you have that same energy and essentially passion to go above and beyond as well.
We heard at the start of the podcast that you all do different roles, you've all had different journeys, but there must be a crossover in terms of skills and experience that are helpful for the sector. So I want to hear in your own words what you think someone should have if wanting to work in logistics. Sukhdev?
So for me, I think it's all about your softer skills and your people skills. Nowadays, anyone can do a job you're in. All you need is correct training. So ultimately, having those people skills and the softer skills to allow you to communicate effectively, to manage your tasks, as well as work as part of a wider team and collaboratively on the same goal. I think that's the main focus.
Neil, in your opinion, what skills and experience should someone have?
I think it sort of boils down to, I suppose, a divide between personal and professional development. And I think Sukhdev answers quite correctly. There's an awful lot of emphasis and correct emphasis on the softer skills and the way in which you interact with people. And most of that is developed on the job. You can teach some of that, but most of it actually comes from within you, and you've either got it or you haven't to a large degree. The more formal skills, they're all taught, they're all trained, and whether they're professional qualifications within the industry or whether they're general business developments, you pay your money, you take your choice, I guess, in many ways. I don't think we should underestimate the role and the influence of professional organisations within the industry. So the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, for me, have been, I suppose, a constant throughout my career. I studied for institute qualifications in the early part of my career, which I found extremely useful, not only in terms of setting the context, but also in terms of making connections as well. And organisations like that, whilst you are going to move around as part and parcel of your career, that sort of band of brothers and sisters that you have gives you access to networking groups as you pursue your career, and they become personal development and learning opportunities as well. So, there's a lot of on the job, there's a lot of formal stuff, but it really comes back to about your own personal qualities and about that inquisitiveness and that curious sort of nature that you need to continually learn and really want to continually push yourself within the industry, but within your personal space, I guess, as well.
Laura, you probably haven't got anything else to add to that.
I do.
Okay.
I think the ones that I would like to add into it is I completely agree. You need to have an openness to learn, a change mindset, somebody that keeps calm. And again, for me, it's around your attitude and behaviours, because I think anyone can go through training. You can do any job if you're trained to do so. But your behaviours and the way you come across is something that you influence, that comes within.
And only you can change that. If you identify within yourself that maybe your attitude could be a little bit better, or you could be more friendly, as an individual approach, isn't it?
It is.
When it comes to growth and development that we've touched on a lot, and you've all had your own experiences of going through the ranks and achieving something. Is there support and help at hand within the sector if you need that, Laura?
There's plenty. There's a wide framework. There's so many training courses that you can go on to. There's platforms. You've got mentors, you've got coaches, you've got people you can talk to in terms of one-to-ones. It's an open environment. So again, you'll get out what you want, what people will get out, what they put in.
Laura spoke earlier on about comfort zones and stepping out of it, and that's where the magic happens. That's where you can grow. Sometimes if you face a challenging situation and you manage to resolve something or you overcome something, that can also give you a sense of passion. Neil, is there a situation where you've had a challenge that you've overcome?
Probably too many to mention, to be absolutely honest. And you know, there are challenges of different sizes, literally on a day-by-day basis. And I think the important thing to recognise is that, and you know, people often use this phrase and in a bit of a throwaway sort of sense, but you know, you are building your personal resilience. You know, you're building your overall personality as you work through your career, and that reservoir of resilience becomes really, really important the more senior you become. So, you know, for me, it's not about any individual challenge; it's the cumulative effect of them that really is the important thing, and how you deal with things on an ongoing basis. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's only business. And, you know, most things that you look at and most challenges that you've faced, you know, if you put them on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of, you know, their life-threatening status, you know, most will never get beyond a 6 or a 7. If we're really honest, you might get the odd one that'll be an 8 or a 9 from time to time. But if you've actually worked your way through and held things in context in the right way, you know, as you've built your career, then those really big hurdles are far easier to overcome.
Throughout this session today, I can feel the passion. I can feel how much you enjoy your sector and your roles. And there's a reason for that. It's because you love what you do and you love the development, the growth and the people. So if someone's listening to this and they are thinking about joining the sector but they're a little bit unsure, what would you say to them to try and convince them that it's the best thing they can possibly do? Laura?
I think it's looking into any opportunities open-eyed, understanding what it has to offer, understanding what you want as a person, what does your journey look like, and give it a go. That there's so much variation, and you don't know until you try. So again, get out your comfort zone and give it a try. I guarantee as soon as the majority of people get into logistics, they will probably stay there. I said before, within Wincanton, I'm at home, and it's a job that I love.
Sukhdev, coming to you, what would your advice be?
I think the main thing is don't be afraid. Regardless of what decision you have to make, there's always pros and cons to that decision. So look at the jobs within logistics and weigh up your pros and cons for each to see which you're most suitable for. I think one thing I established quite early, logistics, and especially the transport side of it, is only one sector. You still have HR roles within logistics. You still have account managers in logistics. The skills and degrees that you've probably got and gained can allow you to get into logistics quite easy. You've already got that platform, but it's knowing how to get into it and finding those pathways.
And last but not least, Neil, 40 years of experience. What would you say to someone thinking about getting into the sector?
Just do it, really. You know, I think Sukhdev explains it really well. This is a broad church. There is a home for everybody in this sector. And, you know, 1 in 12 people in the UK economy work in this sector. So you will know people who are in the industry already. Go talk to them. You know, this is a vibrant sector and a growing sector and a really, really important one to the UK economy. The one thing that I would always say, or two things that I'd always say is, you know, once you're inside the industry, find yourself a mentor. Yeah, somebody you can hang on their coattails and they'll help you to go where you want to go to. And the second thing is, be challenging. Yeah, don't be deferential to seniority. The people who run logistics organisations or retail organisations, whatever it is that you're actually working with, They were in your shoes 20 or 30 years ago. They empathise with the challenge that you're faced, and they will help you. Yeah, so challenge them, push them. You've got skills that they don't have because of the age divide. Yeah, so be confident, yeah, and grasp it with both hands.
Laura, Neil, Sukhdev, thank you all so much for sharing your personal stories and advice. It's been a really insightful session. And it's the first episode of this series, so do make sure you check out the rest of our insights on this series of the Generation Logistics podcast.